Canada versus the US. Topic that very few of us want to chat about because, again, it feels like as a Canadian, they've always treated us what we considered fairly. And for us, like I have a lot of friends down there and a lot of family that is American. And so it's really interesting when I look at both sides of the argument regarding how we adapt to each other, which is, again, we've always leaned on the US as our protector. Our military, comparative to the American military, no different than most other countries in this world, there's no comparison really to be had. When you look at the idea of what they offer us for what we're able to offer them, as a Canadian, I'm very ignorant to a lot of what goes on in the US as far as the trade goes. I didn't even realize that we had tariffs on the US to the extent till we had the conversation. And so the question becomes the one I see most interestingly is, again, I do know this truth, which is if you go to Europe, you do not see an American-made vehicle over there. You don't see Chrysler, GM. You don't see Ford over on that side of the world. And it's curious, like, why wouldn't you? We have all their cars over here. And again, it has everything to do with the tariffs. If GM, Chrysler, or Ford try to ship cars overseas, the tariffs requirements to get into those countries is so massive. So again, when I don't want to speak to this as if I have some great understanding, but when I look at it, it's like, well, that doesn't seem fair. Why are you able to ship your cars to us that we're supposed to buy them from you, and yet we're going to not protect our own people and our own companies locally against the same thing that you're doing to them? So as I look at this with more of a common ground approach, I'm not saying I agree with Donald Trump and all of what he's doing, but I look at it and go, okay, so where have we been fair and where have we been unfairly treated? And I think as Canada, if we're looking at the same thing, we look at our largest global partner, which is the United States, who buys 75% of our products, and only 25% goes to the world. Well, we've made that decision kind of not having our pipelines that we should have built so we can send our energy anywhere in the world. These are things that our government didn't do to protect us as Canadians. And so why is that someone else's fault? And so one of the things I just try to ask honestly as we're going through this time is, okay, so what decisions of the governments that we voted into power have they made to put us in this position? Because the Americans just voted Donald Trump into power. And as you watch what he's doing, and it's not like he's just picking on Canada, he's picking on the world, it seems. So, but with what he's doing, whether you agree with it or you don't, the question is what's our leadership doing? I've listened to people who are now praising Trudeau for his response to America, and I go, man, I don't know if that's the response we should have. And again, Poilievre, same thing. Doug Ford, same thing. Like I listen to these guys and their response, and I'm like, it just affects me personally. And I get you're trying to protect, but if we cancel bourbon coming into Ontario, and yet we have Hireman Walkers locally in this city, who I'm sure sells a lot of things to the States. What if the States responds doing the same thing? Canceling rye going across the border. I'm not saying we don't have other places to send it, but I'm assuming the 400 million Americans that live over there, whatever that number is, basically 10 times the people in Canada, that's a pretty large decision for the Ontario government to make that could cost Hireman Walkers and other distributors like Crown Royal and others that are sending and shipping things to the States. Like I get you're saying it's going to hurt some companies. They could bankrupt some of these companies in Canada. It could completely wipe them out. We have all of our vineyards locally too. We have them like, I just don't understand the idea where it's like we are going to respond with basically whatever we can, or are we going to actually sit down logically, look at this thing, verify what this president is asking of us, and come to an agreement where we're there. And we've done that temporarily. The question is what does that look like long term? And again, I want to be very clear. I am very novice in this. I'm just trying to listen to all sides of the argument from the Canadian perspective. I am Canadian. I want to be Canadian, but I also want a Canada that's strong, sovereign, and capable of saying to the US, yes, we're very grateful for all that you offer us, and we offer you these things, and coming to an agreement about the value. And I think in marriage, it's a really interesting thing. I tend to in my marriage, I'm the provider. That's the way it works. And my wife cooks dinner and she does a lot of things for me. It's not that I never do. It's just rare. If I cook, we're having hot dogs, okay? When my wife cooks, we're having like steak and pork chops and a beautiful meal. It's just different. We bring different things. But the question is, who values what, how? And I think that's really the conversation. When I look at what I bring to the table, I value it because, of course, it's my labor, my hard work. And I value that highly because it was me doing it. My wife, on the same hand, values what she's doing highly, of course, because she's doing it. The question is can I respect and honor what she's bringing to the table, and vice versa? And I think that's where there might be some disconnect between Trump and what Canada provides as a very good business partner and other things. And there's still so much more than I'm sure I can see. But I think if we create good lines of communication, an understanding between the countries, and we have leadership that's actually capable of helping us as a country become solid foundationally that we can grow from, I think we win the game. But I think it's going to be tough for the next little while, because I think we were set up by our current administrations in a very poor way to deal with the US in a scenario like this. And I don't think we can necessarily blame somebody else for our poor decision making.